and there's a famous post-it note now, because we don't have it, it's on the internet, but where he wrote this letter to my mom basically saying that, more about, like, he was explaining that it could be a relative, it could be an aunt and uncle, and please call me, please read this, and my uncle was always there for us in that case when I didn't know why he always watched out for me and my brothers, but now looking back I know why, because he knew that what had happened to us.
That's very protective, I think.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure we were okay, that we grew up okay in that way. Yeah. But he did that with a lot of people. You didn't mention that Gavin, the Arviso, that he had cancer and he was dying, and that was the reason my uncle wanted to help him, even though many people said don't help him because they're scam artists. Yeah, there's an audio of Evan basically talking about extortion. I do believe, and this is just me, Jordy was like kind of an innocent bystander of this whole thing, in that he was a son. Evan and June were in a custody battle, and that's Jordy's mom. And the father he wanted to make a movie basically, and I don't know if you guys saw Robin Hood Men in Tights, the Mel Brooks movie. That was written by Evan Chandler, basically. So he had high hopes of doing his own movie, and that's why the high number in terms of $20 million. He wanted to make his own movie. But then what's unique to me is that right when Jordy became of age, he emancipated from his parents, basically, right after the settlement, pretty much. And there's a lot, if you want to go into it, in terms of there's domestic abuse charges in terms of the father and the son getting into fights and stuff like that. So I've never really, or at least I've never heard our family blame Jordy because he was, I believe, was an innocent bystander in this whole thing, because initially he said nothing happened, and then but the father was great at using the media and using that whole sensationalism to kind of force the hand. And he got a mad dog lawyer that basically was good at trading that. The hardest thing for me this last year, we didn't know about leaving Neverland. We were not even offered the courtesy of a rebuttal or any kind of statement or this or that. It was just thrown out at us like a bomb. Dan Reed, the director, purposely did that. He even states that he didn't want the other side. And the hardest thing was not that, because we had people that went to Sundance. I was debating going to Sundance, but then I was like, I didn't want to bring more attention to it. And so at the last minute, it was going to be me and a couple cousins. We were like, no, we shouldn't go. But what was really frustrating about the whole thing was that Oprah Winfrey then gave it the seal of approval, which made it, now it wasn't even, you couldn't even question it anymore. And that was the frustrating thing with us, was because now we had major networks that didn't want to hear our side. Brandy and I, we were on certain channels, and there's a show called Good Morning America, which is a big show in America. We got canceled the day of because of, I can't say who, but certain bigwigs basically stopped us from saying, because Brandy's story, Michael set up Brandy and Wade together. So Wade's whole thing is that Michael and him were lovers, and that Michael didn't like Wade to like girls. But then Brandy here, which none of Wade's friends, which is very interesting, ever debate Brandy, because they can't, because they know that Brandy and Wade had an 8-year relationship. But Michael was the one that set them up together. And this is the story of, there's a lot of things in terms of Wade wanted to get married at Neverland. This is a place that he supposedly got abused 100 times. Yeah, during the trial, he asked Grace and to get married there. I'm one of the few people that have actually seen Wade and my uncle together in terms of like in the same room in that way, because I was at the 2005. I lived at Neverland. I moved. I literally left my apartment and said I'm gonna be here for my uncle because he's always been there for me. And so I got to see a lot of behind the scenes thing, but the most Wade is someone that it frustrates me so much because it's someone that, you know, when Michael was alive, used him basically, used to, you know, dance, did tributes and everything like that. And then, I mean, Wade was pitching a tribute 24 hours after Michael passed. He was, So You Think You Can Dance, he was pitching a tribute to Michael. He danced in Janet's MTV tribute to Michael Jackson. I think it was a week later. He was actively trying to do the Cirque du Soleil, you know. What's frustrating is you don't get to even hear that side of the story. You guys have to rely on American media to kind of filter it, and it's already biased by that point, and that's the frustrating thing for us, especially since the European media has always been more fair to our family. In 2005, the American media wouldn't even report our side of the defense. The European media would say both sides, and that's all we've ever asked for. I've never said just believe us or just believe them. I've always just said, hey, hear both sides, or at least do research. That's all we've ever asked, and because we're confident enough that if you start doing the research, you'll learn the truth. And everyone that has gone down that path, Danny included, has come to that conclusion, because Michael Jackson's one of the few people that the more research you do, the more innocent he is. And you start learning about 10 years of FBI investigation, secret FBI investigation, where they found nothing. 300 pages of documents where they found nothing. They confiscated his computers. They 2 raids at Neverland at different times in the different decades and found nothing. And that's the thing. But you would think, oh well, judging from the media, he's guilty. But it's like the FBI is an organization where if they want to find something on you, they'll find something on you, especially 10 years worth. And it's really frustrating because we're kind of muzzled in America. We are forced to do, thank goodness there's people like Danny, and me and Brandy did every interview we could do. We said no to no one. I went to the UK, flew to the UK before Leaving Neverland came out, and I went to the Lion's Den, because I hadn't even seen it at that point. And all these journalists are attacking me and saying, how do you know, and you weren't there, and all that stuff. And this is before all the inconsistencies had came out, but I knew my uncle, just the same way you would know your brother or sister. I spent tens of thousands of hours with someone. And when you spend that, you know what they're capable of, and you know what they're not capable of. And just because he's Michael Jackson doesn't mean someone doesn't know someone. And I found that very interesting, because to other people, he's this icon or he's this celebrity. It's like, oh, there's no way someone was that close to him. But I knew him since I was a baby, basically. There's pictures of him holding me, all the way to the December before he passed, in terms of, sending messages. And I was in charge of his storage. I was one of the few people he trusted in life to have his whole storage in my name. But I think it's a very frustrating thing. And I hope you guys just at least, because we are a family still, and just because it's Michael Jackson doesn't mean that there's people in the family that don't suffer, from negative stories. Whether it's my grandma, whether it's my daughter, which I just had, my wife just had, and that was one of the reasons I did this, because Brandy and I are probably the 2 shyest family members in the whole Jackson family. And we were the ones that became the advocates, because I looked at my daughter and I'm like, I don't want her to grow up in a world that thinks Michael Jackson's guilty, because my cousins had to deal with that and would have fights at school and stuff like that. I said, it stops here. And so I've had to be outspoken. I've had to be less shy, and I'm still learning how to do it. But now, as time progresses, there's so many holes in Leaving Neverland now. They've cut. It used to be a 4-hour cut. Now it's like a 3-hour, 30-minute, because they keep editing all the inconsistencies out. You know, from the dinner scene to the train station to the Grand Canyon to Wade burning memorabilia. Supposedly that was Michael's, but he sold all his memorabilia to Julian's. So you're being, well, not you're. Stop.
Well,
I'm starting to get a little
no problem.
passionate.
Well, you know, that's a question I had as well, right? I was like, these fans don't know anything about it. But actually, the argument that, well, what's the point of hearing the other side, you know? That he's a great musician? No, but in 2013, 2014, Wade Robson and Jimmy Safechuck had been suing the Michael Jackson estate for hundreds of millions of dollars. And that generated thousands and thousands of pages of transcripts. So a lot of fans actually combed through everything and have found out many, many instances of inconsistencies that basically destroy their whole story. So, you know, when Leaving Neverland came out, it was really just taking a part of their transcript and putting it on the movie. And you know, some of the things they say in the movie actually like contradict what they say in the transcript. So,
in court depositions,
court depositions as well.
Yeah.
Very good question.
Yeah, and the unique thing is the timeline of Wade. Wade was doing tributes all the way up until he lost the job for Cirque du Soleil. He wanted to be the head director of it, and the state denied him. And that was the same year that he started writing a book about molestation and allegations. The reason I'm so mad at Wade is because I fought to get him into my uncle's memorial. He was ostracized from the family because I didn't know that he had cheated on Brandy. You know, so Brandy was like, he had cut off his ties with the family. I didn't know that. And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, who's all the people that were around my uncle that might get left out? You know, because they're only focused on immediate family right now. So, and one of my friends who knew Wade was like, you know, Wade's trying really hard to get into this memorial. Can you make it happen? I'm like, give me his number. And I have those texts, if you guys want to see them, of him thanking me for getting him making his list of, you know, with his family members and asking for a van and stuff like that, a private van. In hindsight, I wish I would have taken that back, because it's like the ultimate betrayal in that way of someone that, you know, I just wish I would have taken that back. Like, that's one of the things, but Wade has always been someone that has always tied his name to Michael Jackson, good or bad. And I think the thing is now, because he's been cut off, basically, now, you know, this is his kind of...
This is the result.
Yeah, and he wrote it down. He said, you know, what was it, my abuse?
Will make me relevant.
Yeah, and my story of abuse will make me relevant. And no question is off limits, by the way.
Alright, so
Well, that's what we're hoping. Yeah,
A lot of people has, you know.
Yeah, I'm keeping my fingers crossed for Jordy Chandler. I think that will end it, everything.
Well, yeah, there's also, if you watch Square One, there are accusers who were coerced by people to make allegations, and then just broke down in front of the police. That the police thought were were credible, even after the
There's
fact.
a famous Canadian case about that.
Oh, well, this is, I asked her if you would be, because of Leaving Neverland, because of all the misconceptions coming to light again. I feel that, I said that your story would be shining light on a topic that many people have avoided over the years. And, you know, that's why she, whenever fans asked her, she would tell them the story, but she's always been reluctant to go out into the spotlight. She's not like one of the accusers. She doesn't want the fame. She doesn't want the money. But this is, she's very, very uncomfortable in front of the camera when you say that. Like, she is still like mad to me, like to this day, that like I put her in that position, but she knew that it was for a good cause. And I just felt that to get that story out there, to let people know how Jordan Chandler was engaging with his peers in college when the Michael Jackson allegations came out. I thought that it was very important, and of course I only knew about her story because of the witness list. So yeah.
And in 2005, they actively went after Jordy, and he fled the country. He did not want to testify for the prosecution.
Right, and if he did testify, then
Josie
would have been
yeah.
there. No one would need this. Well, no, it's different because I was the one that got it wrong. I thought he was guilty.
Right.
You know, so people. I remember having this premiere at places, and people were asking me like, "Hey, like, have you heard like Michael Jackson songs before?" You know, I'm not going into this documentary being like I am proving Michael Jackson's innocence. Like, no, this is supposed to be me as an objective observer and interviewing people who were a part of the case. Right, but I've already known all the other side, right? And people have heard all about him being guilty over the years, and yeah.
And yeah, for me as well, like when I had to do the UK press, I only said what I knew. Like I didn't know James Safechuck at all, and so when they would ask me questions of James, I would say I don't know him, so I can't comment on James, but I know Wade very well, and I feel comfortable enough telling you who Wade is.
Right.
And later on, the train station, fiasco happened, and I didn't have to explain who James was. But before that, because I don't feel comfortable talking about someone I don't know.
And to add to that, it's not just I'm saying he's innocent, I'm doing all that. We're showing what the media was telling you, what he was being accused of, and basically giving you more context about the situation. For example, the part with Taj Jackson and the 3T photo shoot. We let the FBI profiler tell his side of the story, and then we let Taj have a voice as well. And then you as the viewer can decide which side you find more trustworthy.
Yeah, we did in a band 3T, and we did a photo shoot for one of our singles called Why, and it was during Michael's Stranger in Moscow video, and so during the break we were able to do the photo shoot. Back then we were a boy band. I hate saying that. It's just, but we were a boy band, and we were trying to do something more edgy. Like that was the thing. And there's very few people we trust in life, and we knew that if it was my uncle's photographer, at least there was some trust in that way. We actually thought my uncle owned the photos. We later found out that wasn't true. But these pictures ended up being used against us as like, this is Michael being a pedophile with his nephews and all that stuff, when it was a professional shoot and there was a makeup artist there, a wardrobe and all that stuff. But that's, it's weird because obviously I was there as part of it, but I didn't even know that that's what was being kind of perceived until Radar Online, which is a tabloid, basically printed that, and we ended up suing Radar Online, me and my brothers did, because they basically said our pictures were being used to groom kids, and we sued them and we won, and they had to take it down. But the lie is still out there. Like the source isn't there anymore, because now if you click on the source of any article, it goes to a 404 error kind of thing. But everyone's already believed it in that way, and that was the frustrating thing. And the only reason we were able to sue, which you can't defame the dead, you can't slander the dead, so we can't, like, as a family, we can't sue anyone for leaving Neverland. I would be suing Wade and James and everyone, and making them prove it. But we can't do that as a family because you can't defame the dead. There's no law against that. And so what Radar Online did as a mistake is they said Michael Jackson's nephew, and they had a picture of us, and so we're alive, so we can sue, and that's what we did.
It was overwhelmingly positive. I wasn't expecting that. But I remember like a lot of the comments that I would get from the other side was that, hey, you proved one allegation was false. Good for you. What about the other ones? You know, stuff like that. So
It's always something. Oh, of course, yeah. I think the thing with me was that since I was abused at such a young age, I was actually looking at it more critically. I was looking for something, because the same way, like, if you were, you know, in a domestic abuse relationship, if your friend has symptoms of that, you're extra sensitive to that. They can tell you whatever they want, but you're looking for that. You're like, okay, that's a pattern that I see. And that was the thing. For me, if I believed for a percentage, 1%, that my uncle was guilty, I wouldn't have flown over here and talked to you guys. And that's the thing. And I've probably, out of everyone, probably besides his mother, spent the most time with him in the world, I would say. And I used to not think that until I actually did the math behind it. And, you know, me and my brothers, but then I also have the court case, which my brothers weren't part of, so I edged them out by a couple of, you know, months.
right, and obviously Taj isn't basing that alone off of his feelings towards a relative, because obviously our first instinct would be to defend the ones that we love. However, when you add that with the inconsistencies that have been found out, that categorically will make each case not believable. That definitely means something.
There's not one strand of evidence or fact out there, you know, in 30 years. That's the thing for me. So it doesn't give me much to go off of it in that way. And yes, I am a family member, but if anyone knows me, I've always been about integrity, whatever I do. And I would not hesitate if I found out tomorrow that this was evidence and whatever, I would go 180 on it, because I have to sleep at night. That's my whole thing. I live by integrity and die by it. The media wanted him to be guilty. They had invested all their time and energy into him being guilty. They actually thought he was going to be guilty. They had specials lined up in terms of, this is the jail cell he's going to be in, this is what he's going to wear, and all that stuff. You know, the head of CNN that said it would have been more profitable if he was guilty. It blew up in their face, and they had already, especially with American media, they had already told only one side of the story. So instead of saying, oh, we were wrong, we got it wrong, it was easier for them to say, no, the jury got it wrong, you know. And that's what they literally did, and the jury had to fight back and say, no, we were there, and this. But I think it was different from my understanding in different parts of the country, because what the American media did was that they would listen to the prosecution. You guys are very familiar. It's the same with court. Okay. They would usually listen to the prosecution side. So they'd hear all these rumors about, oh, this maid saw this, whatever. And then they would go out and report it while the defense was tearing down the prosecution. And Tom Meserve would go and get the maid to say, well, I didn't actually see this, so the jury saw a different side. And there's a lot of European journalists that actually stayed the whole way and didn't want to be the first to scoop. But the American media left and wanted to be the first to scoop. So it was just distorted. It was one of those things that people thought he got away with it in American media, which internationally was different. Internationally, people were like, oh, you know, that was the right verdict.
Right, and the Radar Online article talking about all the child porn and stuff that he found, you know, everything was presented in the court that was in his house. You know, the jury saw everything you guys read. They just heard it with context.
Was it the police or someone had to basically step in and say there was no child porn found? But that was a story printed by journalists. 100%. And I've always been, because I'm not in a bubble. You know, my uncle lived in a bubble. We didn't live in a bubble. So I totally get it. That's the thing, especially, that's what's been so especially when you try and explain something and you don't even get the chance to explain. Like, that's the thing that, you know, especially, well, I'm not going to talk bad about America anymore, but it's frustrating because that's where I live. And when you don't have the opportunity to defend, and things are just thrown, and it's like, oh, you're wrong, you just don't know, you weren't there. But you're like, there's more evidence to say that they're lying than there is to say that my uncle's guilty, and that's a thing. And I don't have to say that, it's there in that way. But yeah, I understand that. I would say that no, I actually think it's I think they think he's weird. I think that's a fair assessment in terms of but that's because people have been conditioned for 30 years to think that. I mean, there's magazine and newspaper articles that say freak, on the cover, and it shows Michael Jackson, or it says Wacko Jacko, and it shows Michael Jackson. So you can't help but, even if you thought he was innocent and you see those images subconsciously in your head, it's with you. And so any little bit that adds to that becomes part of the narrative, and that's, it's only natural. I think it just depends on the country, to be completely honest. I think in America, it's definitely like that, but the African American community, it's completely opposite in that way, because they're kind of used to the media not telling the side of the story or being falsely accused of certain things. So it depends on your experience. Italy, France, same thing, because they don't trust American media. So, other countries do. My uncle used to say the British press is one of the most evil press, and it's no coincidence that it's American Britain that are doing this to him in that way. And so it is what it is. It has been hard. The only thing that's been hard is actually studying pedophilia, like in that way. And I'm doing my own documentary, but I've had to take breaks because it's such a raw subject, and it's still, because of what I went through, it's personal in that way. And so, and you really do feel dirty. And what bothers me most is that there's a pro-pedophilia agenda that's being thrown out there. And especially with, I'm being careful with my words. I'll use his own words. Dan Reed basically said he does things that turn him on, and those are his words. So he took on this project because it was something that he liked in that way. And if you notice in his interviews, he's always talking about the love relationship between them and all that. And Wade and James are not saying, they're not saying that all of a sudden they remember, or trauma or whatever. They're saying they knew all along, and that they lied to the public, that this was a relationship, and that's the difference for me in that way. They're saying that, oh no, we knew about it. I testified for Michael, but I knew that I was lying in that way. And so that's the difference. That's the hard pill to swallow for me in that way. Because look at it. It was one of the biggest documentaries that they've had. I mean, Michael Jackson sells worldwide. They sold in over, I think, 160 countries. There's not many people that will sell in every country with their name. Michael Jackson is one of them. And then you add any negative spin to it, and it's doubled its value. And that's the thing. There's been so many things that my uncle's done in terms of charity. That you probably heard the narrative that he died broke, 300 million in debt, but they don't tell you that he, over his lifetime, donated over 400 million to charity, because that's a different narrative. Now all of a sudden it looks like, oh, this man was charitable and he died broke because he gave his money away, but they wanted to make it sound like, oh no, he was stupid and foolish, he just threw money away. And so it's just narrative. On the estate. And that's a common misconception too. I'm not part of it. Like, the estate is who controls Michael Jackson's image and all that stuff, and then there's the family, and we don't get money from the estate. That would be nice to get money from the estate.
So there's a lawsuit between Jackson Estate and HBO.
And the only way they could sue, because you can't sue because of libel or slander of the dead, they had to use a loophole where they had a concert that Michael did, where in the paperwork it said that HBO cannot disparage his name or to slander his name or whatever. So they're going off of that. So it's like a Hail Mary pass, but that's the only way that they could have done it.
I think that because everyone here is like in the fan community, but I wasn't, right? So I actually don't think that everyone after his death believed he was guilty. I think most people believe that he was innocent. I think that especially after his death, there was a complete 180 spin in the media about how they portrayed Michael Jackson. And I think that,
even Martin Bashir,
Yeah.
like, after Michael died, said he didn't think that Michael was a molester, but he had no problem suggesting it to everyone in the world. I think the thing is that it's
right, and now you obviously with the Me Too spin on it, and then you have the biggest entertainer. Of course, it's going to be a big story.
Do you guys know who Corey Feldman is? All right. Corey Feldman's a childhood actor. He's in Goonies. They approached him when they were in '93 about the allegations, and the police were like, "We want stuff on Michael Jackson." And Corey told them back then, he's like, "Hey, look, Michael Jackson's not your man. These are the people that really are the child, predators in Hollywood," and they weren't interested.
He's been molested.
Because Corey had been molested by people in Hollywood. Corey came out when Leaving Neverland Corey came out pro Michael. His organization that he's working with forced him to go on CNN and denounce Michael, or else he was going to lose their support. Because there's so much pressure with this whole Me Too and Time's Up, and especially with the Me Too, I actually reached out to the founder of Me Too before Leaving Neverland had even came. And I said, please contact me. I just want you to know our side of the story. She never did. And that's the frustrating thing. And I know it got to her, by the way, too. And it's like, that's the frustrating thing. There's certain things that want to fit a narrative in that way, because if you can use Michael Jackson's publicity and star power to get a message across, or to, sell a book, or, pro NAMBLA, it's tenfold in that way. It's almost like an endorsement, and that's what's happening.
Well, I don't think you guys should care about what I think. I think you guys should watch my documentary and then research the other things as well, and then come to your own conclusions. I'm not forcing you guys to be like, oh, Michael Jackson's the greatest human being ever. He's never done anything wrong. He's innocent. No, I'm not like that. I think that it's only fair to see what they're accusing him of, and then you read about the other side of the story, read about the transcripts, and then if you, after all of that, believe that he's still guilty, then that's your own decision.
That's your own opinion. Yeah.
But to go through that process, though, is all people like Taj are asking for, not just to blindly believe that he's innocent.
Yeah, you could form your own opinion after you do your own research, but the only thing that we've ever asked is just to hear the other side and do 20 minutes of research. That's it. I mean, that's literally all it takes, because I guarantee you, once you start that 20 minutes, you'll go down like a rabbit hole. You'll be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know about this and this and this, because there's many people that have done that. There's a famous, well, I shouldn't say football player, because you would think soccer, or well, no, whatever, but a famous American football player that believed he was guilty, but his son loved Michael Jackson, and so he felt he didn't want to tell his son that he can't listen to the music anymore, so he said, let me do some research. And now he's one of the biggest advocates, and he was one of the early ones that risked his career basically to say, no, I don't believe this in that way. And that's the thing, it really has been risking everything on the line. I have some people that behind the scenes told me, oh, we know your uncle didn't do this, but they can't say it publicly, because they'll either get fired, or they're in Hollywood, and there's a lot of politics involved. Well, there's a big pedophile problem in Hollywood, and I feel my uncle's always been the smoke and mirrors behind it, because when there's a Michael Jackson story, you don't hear about this story, and so it's not a coincidence that, I'm trying not to get in trouble, there's not a coincidence between Harvey Weinstein and Michael Jackson in terms of they both premiered at Sundance, but you didn't even know that Harvey Weinstein's movie premiered at Sundance, because everyone talked about Leaving Neverland. And they're all the way back to '93, when Harvey's first allegations hit, he had paid people to throw stories out there that were going to kind of suck up the oxygen. And one of the people that he paid was AJ Benson, whose Current Affair or Hard Copy, I guess, was his show. And that guy threw out Michael Jackson stories all the time. And his New York Times, Michael Jackson's listed as one of the people that they made up stories about, kind of trading stories in that way. So Harvey's name would stay out of it. So it's not a coincidence to me in terms of Harvey stuff. And as soon as Harvey starts getting heat or someone else, all of a sudden you're going to hear more about Leaving Neverland or Michael. It always happens like that. I've told him that, yeah. We did with before Gavin. And he was only hanging out with his family and all that stuff. That's why when I said the line, I couldn't let him die, that was specifically what I asked. I said, why would you risk that? Why would you hang out with another child that's not a family member? And he said, I couldn't let this kid die. He's very known to have anonymously donated money to the homeless. I think there's something with his lost childhood. Like, he was known for inner city kids. Like, they were visiting Neverland all the time, 200, 300 busloads, of them. Make-A-Wish was also something important to him. When he got burned, the burn victims became important to him. So I think it's what you identify with. Like, if you have a relative that has Alzheimer's, you get involved in that, And I think that was the thing. A lot of people don't realize, and it sounds like an excuse because I'm very aware of but since working at the age of 5 and being famous at the age of 5, basically, well, not famous at the age of 5, working, at the age of 5, he used to ask me and my brothers, what is it like? What is it like having a childhood? What's it like having a birthday party? What's it like hanging out with your friends? Because he didn't have that luxury. So he was kind of, in a way, trying to rekindle or live vicariously through people, but we don't get that. We don't understand that because we had a childhood. We had that luxury. We had birthday parties. We had certain things, but you take that away, and people do try and rekindle that. But that's been the narrative too. I mean, but also, Rashida Jones, Kadada Jones,
Paris Hilton, the Hiltons.
Yeah, they don't tell you about the girls that he hung out with too, because it's not part of the narrative. It's always, and I know it sounds weird because it's like, it's only children and stuff like that, but
adults are allowed into his room too, right?
Oh, there's never and that was the thing. It was always like, ask your parent. I'm one of those kids, so for me, it's not weird. I'm one of those kids that hung out with him, and I slept at Neverland. I fell asleep on his bed watching Three Stooges and stuff like that. So it's not weird for me. It's part of my life. But business-wise, he was very much a grown-up. Any other part, from prank calls, we had plenty of prank calls before they could dial back *6 or whatever it was called. Where you could actually find out who called. That kind of stopped our fun. But we'd throw water balloons. We're notorious for that. Stink bombs. We used to go down the street driving. This is at the height of his career. We would, I shouldn't tell you guys this, but we would literally drive and we'd buy these stink bombs that were and these snappers where, they make this loud noise. And people that were walking, we'd just throw them and we'd just laugh. This is during the Billie Jean and Thriller era. But he was just a big kid. We had pie fights, and that was his element. I think that's what got him creative in that way. Yeah. But it's something that, with any kind of person that's transcends or is quote unquote a genius, they're not usually normal. They live a different life than we do in that way. And so, I hesitate on the word weird. I always say eccentric because he was very eccentric. But I've asked, for my documentary, one of the questions that I asked whoever I interviewed was, in your personal opinion, was Michael Jackson weird? And everyone that knew him was like, no, he was never weird. It was just, that was the life he lived. I was never there, so I don't know that answer in terms of,
That's-
in terms of,
different.
I could tell you with us, you know, it was like he stayed over our house in that way. Usually what happened though, we'd fall asleep and then by the time we woke up, he was on the floor
He
sleeping.
didn't sleep much, right?
Huh?
He didn't sleep much.
He slept probably 2 hours out of every day. Yeah, he was a workaholic, so it was not. I personally, I don't think I've ever seen him sleep. And that's a scary thing to say. Yeah, like I've never seen him actually, like, you know, I've seen video of him sleeping like as a kid, but I've never, because he was a workaholic. He was always up, you know, and I'd fall asleep and then, you know, he'd be on the floor. But I don't remember a time of me literally saying, "Oh, there's my uncle sleeping," you know.
Well, thank you for your time and attention.
Yeah, thank you.